The gentle hum of the ship's engines filled the quiet corridors as Ambassador David Walsh reviewed his notes one final time. 3 years of war had left both sides exhausted, and today might finally bring peace between humanity and the Drakmari Empire. The conference room aboard the UES Harmony buzzed with nervous energy as diplomats prepared their final documents. Dr. Amy Chen sat across from Walsh, studying holographic displays of Drakmari anatomy and culture. Her expertise in alien biology had proven invaluable during the preliminary talks. The Drakmari were warriors by nature, with 4 powerful arms and thick chitinous armor covering their bodies. Their society valued honor above all else, which made these peace negotiations both promising and dangerous. The Elder Council seems genuinely interested in ending this conflict, Walsh said, adjusting his formal diplomatic robes. Intelligence. Reports suggest their younger warriors are pushing for continued expansion, but the elders understand the cost of war. Colonel Ryan Blake nodded from his position near the viewport. His role as military advisor was officially ceremonial, but his presence reminded everyone that humanity took these talks seriously. The border skirmishes have cost both sides too much. Our colonies need peace to rebuild, and their expansion has stalled because of our resistance. Through the large windows, Crossroads Station grew larger as they approached. The massive structure served as neutral ground for diplomatic meetings between various galactic civilizations. Its spinning rings and docking bays could accommodate ships from dozens of different species, making it the perfect location for delicate negotiations. Captain Maria Torres entered the conference room, her uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. "We'll be docking in 20 minutes. The Drakmari delegation arrived yesterday and has already set up in the main conference hall. Station security reports no unusual activity. The peace talks had taken months to arrange. Both governments had agreed to meet at Crossroads because of its reputation for neutrality and security. The station's administrators took great pride in maintaining order during sensitive diplomatic missions. No weapons were allowed in the conference areas, and powerful shields protected the facility from outside interference." Walsh gathered his documents and stood up. "Remember, everyone, we're not just representing Earth today. Dozens of human colonies are counting on us to end this war. The Drakmari respect strength, but they also value honor. If we can show them that peace serves both our interests, we might avoid years of continued bloodshed." Dr. Chen closed her research files and joined the group heading toward the docking bay. Their communication patterns suggest they're approaching this seriously. Elder Thax has significant influence within their government, and preliminary discussions have been more productive than we expected. The docking procedure went smoothly as the Harmony connected with Crossroads Station. The diplomatic team gathered their materials and prepared to disembark. Protocol required them to leave most of their security detail aboard the ship, as Crossroads maintained its own protective forces. Blake checked his small sidearm one final time before surrendering it to the ship's security officer. Station regulations were strict about weapons, and violating them would undermine the entire mission. "I'll be staying close to the ambassador throughout the talks. Something about this feels too convenient, but maybe I'm just being paranoid." Torres clasped Blake's shoulder. "Trust your instincts, but remember we're here to make peace. The Drakmari have as much to gain from ending this war as we do. Their expansion into our sector has been costly for them, too." The airlock opened with a soft hiss, revealing the bustling interior of Crossroads Station. Beings from across the galaxy moved through the corridors, conducting business and diplomacy in dozens of different languages. The sight never failed to remind humans how vast and diverse the galactic community truly was. A station administrator approached them, her blue skin marking her as one of the peaceful Andorian species. "Ambassador Walsh, welcome to Crossroads. The Drakmari delegation is waiting in Conference Hall Alpha. They've expressed eagerness to begin the formal negotiations." The human delegation followed her through the station's main corridors. The artificial gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal, and the air carried the subtle scents of various alien atmospheres. Crossroads had been designed to accommodate many different species, making it genuinely neutral ground for sensitive discussions. Conference Hall Alpha was impressive, with a large circular table surrounded by comfortable seating for both human and Drakmari physiology. Advanced translation equipment would ensure perfect communication between the species, eliminating any chance of misunderstandings that might derail the talks. Elder Thax rose from his seat as the humans entered. His forearms moved in a formal greeting gesture, and his translator rendered his words in perfect English. Ambassador Walsh, we welcome you to these discussions. The Drakmari Empire hopes today marks the beginning of a new era between our peoples. Walsh returned the formal greeting, bowing slightly in the Drakmari style. Elder Thax, humanity is honored by your presence. We share your hope that wisdom will prevail over warfare, and that both our civilizations can prosper in peace. The initial ceremonies proceeded according to diplomatic protocol. Both sides presented their credentials and stated their authority to negotiate on behalf of their governments. The atmosphere seemed genuinely cordial, with neither delegation showing signs of hostility or deception. Dr. Chen took careful notes as the Drakmari delegation introduced themselves. Besides Elder Thax, they had brought military advisors, trade, specialists, and cultural attachés. Their body language appeared relaxed and open, suggesting they had come to Crossroads with genuine intentions to negotiate. As the formal introductions concluded, Elder Thax spread his arms wide in a gesture of openness. Let us begin by acknowledging the losses both sides have suffered. The Drakmari Empire mourns its fallen warriors, just as humanity grieves for its colonists. Perhaps from this shared sorrow, we can build a foundation for lasting peace. Walsh nodded solemnly. War brings honor to no one when it continues without purpose. Our preliminary discussions suggest we can find terms that serve both our people's interests. The galaxy is vast enough for humanity and the Drakmari Empire to coexist and even prosper together. Blake remained alert, but felt some of his tension easing. The Drakmari seemed sincere in their desire for peace. Perhaps his military paranoia had been unnecessary after all. The talks were off to a promising start, and both sides appeared committed to finding a diplomatic solution to their conflict. 3 days into the negotiations, the conference hall buzzed with productive energy as both delegations worked through complex territorial agreements. Ambassador Walsh felt cautiously optimistic about the progress they were making. The Drakmari had proven more reasonable than intelligence reports had suggested, and Elder Thax seemed genuinely committed to finding peaceful solutions. The morning session focused on border demarcation in the disputed Kilos sector. Human colonies had established mining operations on several asteroids before the Drakmari expansion reached the area. Rather than demanding complete withdrawal, Elder Thax proposed joint ventures that would benefit both species. The Drakmari Empire recognizes human claims to the established mining facilities, Elder Thax said, his forearms moving in emphatic gestures as his translator rendered his words. However, our people require access to the rare metals found only in this region. Perhaps shared operations would serve both our needs better than continued conflict. Walsh exchanged glances with his economic advisor before responding. Joint ventures could indeed prove beneficial. Human mining technology has proven efficient in asteroid operations, while Drakmari manufacturing capabilities could process the raw materials more effectively than either of us working alone. Dr. Chen watched the Drakmari delegation carefully throughout the discussions. Her training in xenobiology made her sensitive to subtle behavioral patterns that others might miss. Most of Elder Thax's group displayed relaxed postures and open body language consistent with genuine negotiation. However, 2 of the younger Drakmari military advisors showed signs of tension that seemed inconsistent with the peaceful atmosphere. Their secondary arms remained slightly flexed, a position that in Drakmari culture indicated readiness for action. Their eye movements also followed patterns, suggesting they were memorizing details about the human delegation rather than focusing on the diplomatic proposals. Dr. Chen made mental notes, but decided not to raise concerns that might disrupt the promising talks. Colonel Blake spent his time reviewing security protocols with station administrators. Crossroads maintained strict neutrality, but he wanted to ensure no external threats could interfere with the negotiations. The station's defensive systems were impressive, with shields capable of withstanding most conventional attacks and security. Forces trained to handle diplomatic crises. The Drakmari escort fleet is maintaining position at the system's edge, just as your ships are doing, the security chief reported. Both sides have honored the agreement to keep military vessels away from the station. We've detected no unusual communications or movement patterns. Despite the reassuring report, Blake couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. His combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, even when logic suggested everything was proceeding normally. The Drakmari delegation seemed almost too cooperative, too willing to make concessions that favored human interests. Back in the conference hall, the afternoon session turned to cultural exchange programs. Elder Thax proposed student exchanges between human universities and Drakmari military academies. The idea surprised everyone, as the warrior species had never before shown interest in sharing their educational systems with other civilizations. Young Drakmari warriors could learn much from human diplomatic techniques, Elder Thax explained. Meanwhile, human students might benefit from understanding our concepts of honor and strategic thinking. Such exchanges could prevent future misunderstandings between our peoples. Walsh was impressed by the proposal's thoughtfulness. Cultural exchange has proven valuable in humanity's relationships with other species. Understanding each other's perspectives and values creates stronger foundations for lasting peace than formal treaties alone. The discussions continued late into the evening as both sides worked through technical details of trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and mutual defense pacts. The Drakmari showed particular interest in human medical technology, while humans expressed fascination with Drakmari metallurgy and manufacturing processes. Dr. Chen found herself increasingly troubled by the inconsistencies she observed in the Drakmari delegation. While Elder Thax and most of his group appeared genuinely engaged in the negotiations, several members displayed stress indicators that suggested deception or hidden agendas. Their biochemical signatures, barely detectable to human senses, indicated elevated adrenaline levels inappropriate for peaceful discussions. During a break in the formal sessions, she approached Ambassador Walsh privately. I'm concerned about some of the behavioral patterns I'm observing in the Drakmari delegation. Several members are showing physiological signs of stress and deception that don't match the cooperative atmosphere of the talks. Walsh considered her concerns carefully. Dr. Chen's expertise had proven valuable in previous diplomatic missions, and her observations deserved serious attention. However, the negotiations were proceeding so well that raising suspicions might derail the entire peace process. Continue monitoring the situation, Walsh decided. But let's not act on suspicions alone. The potential for peace is too important to jeopardize without concrete evidence of deception. Perhaps the stress you're detecting is simply nervousness about making such momentous decisions. Meanwhile, Colonel Blake received a coded message from his contacts in military intelligence. Drakmari fleet movements near human space had increased significantly over the past week, with multiple battle groups repositioning closer to colonial territories. The movements could be explained as normal patrol rotations, but the timing seemed suspicious given the ongoing peace talks. Blake studied the intelligence reports in his private quarters aboard the Harmony. The fleet movements followed patterns. That suggested preparation for coordinated action rather than routine operations. If the Drakmari were planning military action, the peace talks could be an elaborate deception designed to lower human defenses. He decided to share his concerns with Captain Torres, who had remained aboard the Harmony throughout the negotiations. Intelligence indicates unusual Drakmari military activity near our colonies. It could be coincidental, but the timing makes me suspicious. Torres reviewed the data on her command screens. The patterns do look concerning, but attacking during peace talks would be incredibly bold, even for the Drakmari. They're warriors, but they also value honor. Betraying diplomatic negotiations would damage their reputation with other galactic civilizations. Unless they believe the benefits outweigh the diplomatic costs, Blake replied. If they think they can achieve decisive victory by catching us off guard, they might consider the breach of honor acceptable. As the third day of negotiations concluded, both delegations expressed satisfaction with the progress they had made. Elder Thax announced that the Drakmari High Command had approved the preliminary agreements, pending final review of the complete treaty document. Tomorrow we shall complete the formal peace accord, Elder Thax declared. The Drakmari Empire looks forward to a new chapter in our relationship with humanity, built on mutual respect and shared prosperity. Ambassador Walsh felt a surge of pride as he prepared the final documents. Despite initial concerns about negotiating with a warrior species, the talks had exceeded all expectations. The peace treaty would not only end the current conflict, but establish frameworks for long-term cooperation between the two civilizations. However, as the human delegation retired to their quarters, Dr. Chen's concerns continued to grow. The behavioral inconsistencies she had observed were becoming more pronounced, and several Drakmari delegates were displaying biochemical signatures consistent with anticipation of violent action. Something was definitely wrong, but she couldn't determine exactly what threat they might be facing. The morning of the fourth day arrived with an atmosphere of celebration throughout Crossroads Station. Diplomatic staff from various species had gathered to witness the historic signing of the human Drakmari peace accord. The agreement represented more than just an end to border conflicts. It would establish humanity as a major diplomatic power in galactic politics. Ambassador Walsh entered Conference Hall Alpha carrying the final treaty documents, each page carefully reviewed and approved by both governments. The formal signing ceremony would be broadcast across the galaxy, demonstrating that even the most warlike species could choose peace over conquest when presented with reasonable alternatives. Elder Thax waited at the ceremonial table, wearing elaborate robes that represented his authority to bind the Drakmari Empire to the agreement. His delegation had expanded overnight, with additional military officers and government officials arriving to witness the historic moment. The increased presence seemed appropriate for such a significant occasion. Dr. Chen felt her unease growing as she observed the enlarged Drakmari group. The newcomers displayed the same stress indicators she had noticed in several of the original delegates. Their biochemical signatures suggested elevated adrenaline and heightened alertness, as if they were preparing for combat rather than a peaceful ceremony. "Something is wrong," she whispered to Colonel Blake as they took their seats. "The biological markers I'm detecting are consistent with pre-combat preparation, not diplomatic celebration. Their body chemistry indicates they're expecting violence, not peace." Blake scanned the room carefully, his military training automatically noting potential threats and escape routes. The Drakmari delegation had indeed grown larger, and several of the newcomers wore formal robes that could easily conceal weapons. Station security seemed normal, but he realized that neutral ground meant limited protection if the situation turned hostile. "Stay close to the ambassador," Blake replied quietly. "If you're right about their intentions, we'll need to protect him at all costs. The station's security should prevent any major incidents, but we can't take chances." Captain Torres watched the ceremony from the Harmony's command center, monitoring communications between the station and both escort fleets. Everything appeared normal on the surface, but she had learned to trust Colonel Blake's instincts during their years of military service together. His concerns about Drakmari fleet movements had been weighing on her mind. Ambassador Walsh approached the signing table with confidence, unaware of the growing tension among his security team. The treaty represented the culmination of his diplomatic career, and he was determined to make the ceremony memorable for all the right reasons. "Today marks a new beginning for human-Drakmari relations," Walsh announced to the gathered witnesses. "This treaty proves that even ancient enemies can find common ground when they choose wisdom over warfare." Elder Thax rose from his seat, his forearms spreading in what appeared to be a gesture of agreement. However, instead of reaching for the ceremonial pen, his hands moved to his robes. The fabric fell away to reveal gleaming battle armor underneath, and his peaceful expression transformed into a predatory grin. "Indeed, a new beginning," Elder Thax snarled, his translator now carrying tones of menace rather than diplomacy. "The beginning of humanity's humiliation before the entire galaxy." The conference hall erupted into chaos as hidden Drakmari warriors emerged from concealed positions throughout the room. Station security guards collapsed as stun weapons discharged from multiple directions. The peaceful treaty signing had become a carefully orchestrated trap, with the human delegation caught completely off guard. Blake reacted instantly, his military training overriding diplomatic protocol. He lunged toward Ambassador Walsh, trying to shield him from the Drakmari warriors who were moving to surround the human delegation. His hand reached for his sidearm before remembering that weapons were forbidden in the conference areas. "You believed our desire for peace," Elder Thax laughed, producing a ceremonial blade that gleamed with deadly sharpness. "Your species' weakness for diplomacy has delivered you into our hands. The galaxy will watch as we demonstrate human frailty and Drakmari superiority." Dr. Chen pressed her back against the wall, her scientific mind racing to understand the scope of the deception. The entire peace negotiation had been an elaborate intelligence-gathering operation. The Drakmari had learned human diplomatic protocols, defensive capabilities, and psychological weaknesses through 3 days of seemingly genuine talks. The treaty negotiations gave us everything we needed to know about human military positions and colonial defenses, one of the Drakmari military officers announced. "Your government's eagerness for peace made you careless with strategic information." Blake fought desperately against overwhelming odds, using furniture and diplomatic equipment as improvised weapons. His combat skills were impressive, but facing multiple armed Drakmari warriors in close quarters was nearly impossible. "Torres!" he shouted into his communication device before a stun blast knocked him unconscious. Ambassador Walsh struggled against his captors, finally understanding the magnitude of their miscalculation. "The galactic community will never forgive this betrayal of diplomatic immunity. You're destroying centuries of civilized interaction between species." "Civilization is a luxury for the weak," Elder Thax replied, raising his ceremonial blade. "The strong take what they need and destroy those who oppose them. Your execution will be broadcast to every human colony, showing them the price of resistance to Drakmari expansion." Aboard the Harmony, Captain Torres received Blake's desperate transmission just as proximity alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Drakmari warships were decloaking around Crossroads Station, their weapons already powering up for attack. The neutral meeting ground had become the center of a massive military ambush. "Red alert!" Torres commanded, her diplomatic mission instantly transforming into a combat situation. "All hands to battle stations. Raise shields and prepare for immediate departure. Send emergency signals to the nearest human fleet units." The Harmony's sensors detected more than 20 Drakmari warships surrounding the station, far more than the small escort fleet that had been visible during the negotiations. The enemy had been planning this ambush for months, possibly years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to humiliate humanity on the galactic stage. Dr. Chen watched in horror as Elder Thax prepared to execute Ambassador Walsh before the broadcast. Cameras that had been installed to record the peace treaty signing. The ceremony had been designed from the beginning as a propaganda victory, demonstrating Drakmari superiority through the public murder of human diplomats. Your people's reputation. For peaceful negotiation ends today, Elder Thax declared, his blade gleaming under the conference hall lights. The galaxy will learn that mercy is weakness, and weakness deserves only death. The trap had been sprung perfectly, with the human delegation helpless and their escort ship outnumbered by overwhelming Drakmari forces. The peaceful mission had become a nightmare of betrayal and impending violence, with humanity about to suffer a devastating blow to its diplomatic credibility and military reputation. The galactic broadcast began as Elder Thax raised his ceremonial blade above Ambassador Walsh's neck. Billions of beings across known space watched what they believed would be humanity's ultimate humiliation. The Drakmari had carefully choreographed this moment to demonstrate their dominance and humanity's weakness to every civilization in the galaxy. Witness the fate of those who oppose Drakmari expansion, Elder Thax announced to the cameras. Let this human's death serve as a warning to all species who mistake our willingness to negotiate for weakness. Colonel Blake's eyes snapped open just as the blade began its descent. The stun blast that had knocked him unconscious hadn't been calibrated for human physiology, and his body had metabolized the alien weapon's effects faster than the Drakmari expected. His hand shot out with precision born from years of combat training, striking a nerve cluster that paralyzed Elder Thax's primary arm. Military advisor was just my cover story, Blake snarled, rising to his feet with fluid grace that betrayed his true training. Special Diplomatic Protection Corps, and I really hate it when someone threatens my ambassador. The watching galaxy gasped as Blake moved with inhuman speed and precision. His diplomatic robes tore away to reveal a combat suit equipped with enhancement systems that turned him into a one-man army. The weak human diplomat had become something deadly and terrifying in the span of seconds. Dr. Chen wasn't the helpless scientist she appeared to be either. Her xenobiology expertise included detailed knowledge of Drakmari anatomy and physiology. She produced a small device from her clothing and activated it, filling the air with ultrasonic frequencies that disrupted Drakmari nervous systems, causing several warriors to collapse in convulsions. Did you really think humanity would send unprotected diplomats into hostile territory? Dr. Chen asked, her voice carrying tones of scientific curiosity mixed with combat readiness. Every member of this delegation has multiple layers of protection and training. Elder Thax staggered backward, his paralyzed arm hanging uselessly while his other 3 limbs tried to coordinate an attack. Impossible! Our intelligence confirmed that humans are weak pacifists who rely on negotiation because they lack warrior strength. Blake's combat implants activated fully, enhancing his speed and strength to levels that matched Drakmari capabilities. He moved through the enemy warriors like a force of nature, using their own ceremonial weapons against them with deadly efficiency. You made one critical error in your intelligence gathering. You assumed that because we prefer peace, we're incapable of war. Meanwhile, aboard the Harmony, Captain Torres faced the Drakmari fleet that had surrounded Crossroads Station. 20 warships against her single vessel should have been overwhelming odds, but Torres smiled grimly as she prepared to reveal humanity's greatest secret. All hands, prepare for combat transformation, she announced over the ship's communication system. Authorization Torres 77 Alpha. Execute protocol revelation. The Harmony's hull began shifting as hidden armor plating slid into position and concealed weapon systems deployed. What had appeared to be a peaceful diplomatic vessel transformed into something that made the Drakmari fleet commanders question their intelligence reports. Advanced weapon arrays emerged from cunningly hidden compartments, and the ship's defensive systems activated with power levels that shouldn't have been possible. The UES Harmony wasn't just a diplomatic ship, Torres announced on an open channel that reached both the Drakmari fleet and the Galactic Broadcast Network. She's humanity's newest stealth warship, disguised as a peaceful envoy. You wanted to see human military capabilities? Allow me to provide a demonstration. The first Drakmari warship to open fire discovered that the Harmony's shields were far more advanced than anything in their tactical databases. Human defensive technology absorbed and redirected energy weapons with efficiency that bordered on the impossible. The return fire from the Harmony's weapon systems completely vaporized the attacking vessel in a single devastating salvo. Back in the conference hall, Elder Thax watched in growing horror as Blake systematically dismantled his warrior elite. The human moved with combat grace that rivaled the greatest Drakmari fighters, but his techniques were completely unfamiliar. Every strike targeted specific biological weak points with scientific precision. Humanity has been watching and learning. From every species in the galaxy, Blake explained as he disabled another attacker. We know exactly how to fight Drakmari warriors because we've been preparing for this possibility since our first contact. Did you think we would enter galactic politics without understanding potential threats? Dr. Chen coordinated with Blake. Seamlessly, her ultrasonic device creating zones of neural disruption that left enemy warriors helpless against his precise attacks. Ambassador Walsh, though shaken by the betrayal, began documenting everything for the historical record that would follow this incident. The Drakmari fleet around Crossroads Station found themselves facing technological superiority they hadn't imagined possible. The Harmony's weapons systems used principles that their scientists couldn't immediately comprehend. Energy weapons that should have been impossible to deflect were turned back against their own ships with devastating effect. Human military development focused on efficiency rather than show, Torres explained as her ship systematically destroyed the ambush fleet. While you were building bigger ships and stronger armor, we were developing weapons that make size and strength irrelevant. Elder Thax made one final desperate attack, using all three of his functional arms to wield traditional Drakmari weapons against Blake. The human caught each weapon with movements that seemed almost casual, then applied leverage and pressure that shattered the ceremonial blades like glass. Your warrior culture taught you to value individual strength and honor in combat, Blake said, restraining the defeated elder without causing permanent injury. Human military philosophy emphasizes adaptation, technology, and strategic thinking. We don't fight for honor, we fight to win. The galactic broadcast that was supposed to show human weakness instead revealed a species that had been vastly underestimated. The peaceful diplomats were highly trained operatives, and their escort ship was actually an advanced warship capable of destroying entire fleets. The galaxy's perception of humanity changed dramatically in the span of minutes. As the last Drakmari warship surrendered or fled, Torres opened communications with Crossroads Station. This is Captain Torres of the UES Harmony. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Diplomatic immunity has been restored and the human delegation is secure. Elder Thax, bound and defeated, stared at Blake with something approaching respect, mixed with fear. We believed humans were weak because you chose negotiation over conquest. We were wrong. Blake helped Ambassador Walsh to his feet, checking him for injuries before responding to the defeated Drakmari leader. We prefer diplomacy because we're good at it, not because we're incapable of warfare. The difference is that we use violence as a last resort, not a first option. But when that line gets crossed, we become something you really don't want to face. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the Crossroads incident, as historians were already calling it. Representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered to address the shocking revelation of humanity's true military capabilities and the Drakmari Empire's betrayal of diplomatic immunity. Ambassador Walsh stood before the assembled delegates, his formal robes replaced with the uniform of humanity's diplomatic corps. The change in appearance was subtle, but significant, reflecting humanity's new position in galactic politics. The species that had been seen as talented but naive negotiators was now recognized as a formidable power that had been deliberately concealing its strength. The Drakmari Empire's attack on our peace delegation was not just an act of war against humanity, Walsh began, his voice carrying across the vast council chamber. It was an assault on the fundamental principles that allow different species to coexist peacefully in this galaxy. Diplomatic immunity exists to protect all of us. Elder Thax sat in the defendants section, his ceremonial armor replaced with prisoner restraints that had been specially designed for Drakmari physiology. His 3 surviving arms were bound, but his eyes still burned with the fierce pride of his warrior species. Even in defeat, he refused to show submission to what he still considered inferior beings. The Andorian council speaker called for order as murmurs spread through the assembly. Ambassador Walsh, the council acknowledges the grave violation of diplomatic protocols. However, we must also address the deception practiced by humanity regarding your military capabilities. Many species feel they have been misled about human intentions and abilities. Walsh nodded respectfully to the speaker before responding. Humanity never lied about our nature or our capabilities. We simply allowed others to make assumptions about us based on our preference for peaceful solutions. The Drakmari chose to interpret our diplomatic approach as weakness rather than wisdom. Colonel Blake entered the chamber carrying a sealed data container that held detailed records of the Crossroads incident. His role as a Special Diplomatic Protection Corps operative was now public knowledge, and his presence served as a reminder of humanity's hidden depths. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably as he passed their seats. The evidence we present today will show that the Drakmari Empire planned this betrayal for months, Blake announced. Their peace negotiations were a sham designed to gather intelligence on human defenses and humiliate us before the galaxy. They never intended to honor any agreements. Dr. Chen activated a holographic display that showed the biological analysis she had conducted on the Drakmari delegation. Physiological evidence indicates that multiple members of their diplomatic team were experiencing stress responses consistent with planned deception from the very first day of negotiations. They were never sincere about seeking peace. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Recorded communications between Drakmari fleet elements revealed the coordinated nature of the ambush. Intelligence files recovered from captured ships showed detailed plans for follow-up attacks on human colonies once the delegation had been eliminated. Elder Thax finally spoke, his translator rendering his words with defiant pride. The Drakmari Empire regrets nothing. We tested human strength and found it greater than expected, but we do not apologize for following warrior traditions. The strong take what they need from the weak. And that attitude is exactly why the Drakmari Empire will find itself isolated in galactic politics, Walsh replied calmly. Civilized species value reliability and honor in their diplomatic relationships. Your betrayal has demonstrated that the Drakmari cannot be trusted to honor agreements or respect established protocols. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to impose severe sanctions on the Drakmari Empire. Trade restrictions, diplomatic isolation, and territorial penalties would remain in effect until the Empire demonstrated genuine commitment to peaceful coexistence. Elder Thax and his surviving conspirators would face trial for war crimes against diplomatic personnel. More significantly for humanity, the Council formally recognized Earth as a major galactic power with enhanced voting rights and security responsibilities. The species that had been marginalized as peaceful weaklings was now acknowledged as a crucial stabilizing force in interstellar relations. Captain Torres received new orders as she prepared the Harmony for departure from Crossroads Station. The ship would be leading a small task force to establish humanity's first permanent military outpost in disputed space. The facility would serve as both a deterrent to potential aggressors and a symbol of humanity's new role in galactic security. Command wants us to set up shop in the neutral zone, Torres explained to her senior officers. Multiple species have requested human mediation for their territorial disputes, and apparently our diplomatic skills are in high demand now that everyone knows we can back up our negotiations with force. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved. Humanity's greatest diplomatic success had come through revealing their capacity for devastating warfare. The galaxy now understood that human preference for peaceful solutions stemmed from confidence in their abilities rather than fear of conflict. Ambassador Walsh prepared his final report on the Crossroads incident as he traveled back toward Earth. The failed peace mission had fundamentally altered humanity's position in galactic politics, transforming them from minor diplomatic players into major power brokers whose opinions carried significant weight. The Drakmari taught the galaxy an important lesson about humanity, Walsh wrote in his classified summary. We are not peaceful because we are weak. We are peaceful because we are strong enough to choose restraint. When that choice is taken away from us, we become something that even warrior species fear to face. Dr. Chen published her analysis of the incident in the Journal of Xenobiology, focusing on the importance of understanding alien psychology in diplomatic relationships. Her work became required reading for diplomatic personnel throughout human space, helping to prevent future deceptions by hostile species. Blake returned to his duties with the Special Diplomatic Protection Corps, but his role had evolved beyond simple security work. Humanity's diplomatic missions now operated with the understanding that they might face military threats, and his unit expanded to provide comprehensive protection for human negotiators. The Drakmari Empire's attempted betrayal had backfired completely. Instead of demonstrating human weakness, it had revealed capabilities that made other species reconsider their relationships with Earth. Trade agreements, defense pacts, and cultural exchanges proliferated as civilizations sought to align themselves with humanity's emerging power. Elder Thack spent his imprisonment studying human military tactics and diplomatic strategies, gradually developing a grudging respect for the species he had tried to humiliate. His journals, eventually published after his death, provided insights into humanity that helped other species understand their new galactic neighbors. The humans are not weak, he wrote in his final entry. They are patient. They prefer to build rather than destroy, to negotiate rather than conquer, to create rather than eliminate. But when forced to fight, they become more dangerous than any warrior species because they fight not for honor or glory, but for the survival and prosperity of everything they have built. That makes them unstoppable. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity not despite their preference for peace, but because of the strength that preference represented. The failed peace mission had become the foundation of a new galactic order, with humanity serving as both diplomat and enforcer for civilized behavior among the stars.